In 1983, 10 people gathered for Thanksgiving dinner at the Miller family home in Phoenix, Arizona. The turkey was carved, the wine was poured, the conversation was warm. By morning, all 10 people had vanished. No bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle. For 41 years, the case remained unsolved. Then, a vintage camera bought at an estate sale revealed the last 12 photographs ever taken in that house and the terrifying truth about what happened during their final meal. The Miller family home at 2847 Desert Rose Drive was the heart of their quiet Phoenix neighborhood. Robert Miller, 64, a retired aircraft mechanic, and his wife Janet, 62, a former elementary school teacher, had been hosting their annual Thanksgiving celebration for over 20 years. Their modest ranch-style house with its desert landscaping and red tile roof was where family and friends gathered every November to share gratitude and create memories. This particular Thanksgiving in 1983 was no different from the others. Robert had spent the morning preparing his famous herb-crusted turkey while Janet arranged her grandmother's china on the dining room table. The guest list was the same as always. Their son David, 38, who worked in real estate, along with his wife Susan and their 2 teenage children, Jennifer, 14, and Michael, 16. 4 longtime family friends completed the party of 10, the Hendersons from next door, the Garcias who had known the Millers since the 1960s, and Margaret Chen, Janet's closest friend since their teaching days. The dinner began at 4 o'clock on November 24th, 1983. Neighbors later reported seeing cars in the Miller driveway and warm light glowing from the dining room windows. Everything appeared normal, peaceful, exactly as it should be for a family holiday celebration. But by dawn on November 25th, something had gone terribly wrong. It was Margaret Chen's sister who made the discovery. When Margaret failed to return home by midnight, highly unusual for someone who never stayed out late, her family became concerned. The sister drove to the Miller house at 6:30 in the morning to check on everyone. She found the front door unlocked and slightly ajar. Inside, the scene was both ordinary and deeply disturbing. The Thanksgiving dinner remained on the table, barely touched. Wine glasses sat half full, their contents still liquid. Cloth napkins were dropped beside plates as if the diners had stood up suddenly. Chairs were pushed back from the table at odd angles, and one place setting had been knocked to the floor. But there was no sign of the 10 people who had gathered for dinner just 14 hours earlier. The Phoenix Police Department responded within minutes. Officers searched every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. They found no signs of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle, no blood or weapons. The guests' cars remained in the driveway with keys still inside. Purses and wallets sat untouched on the kitchen counter. Even the Miller's dog, a gentle golden retriever named Buster, was found unharmed in the backyard, though he seemed unusually agitated. Detective Raymond Torres led the initial investigation. A 20-year veteran of the force, Torres had worked hundreds of missing person cases, but he'd never encountered anything like this. 10 people simply didn't vanish simultaneously without leaving some trace of what had happened to them. The search expanded rapidly. Police helicopters circled the neighborhood with thermal imaging equipment. Search and rescue teams combed the nearby desert with tracking dogs. Officers went door to door questioning neighbors, asking if anyone had seen or heard anything unusual on Thanksgiving night. The canvas revealed a troubling detail. No one had heard anything. In a neighborhood where sounds carried easily across small yards, where residents knew each other's habits and routines, 10 people had disappeared without making a sound. Federal investigators arrived on the 3rd day. The FBI's Missing Persons Unit took over the case, bringing with them resources the local police couldn't match. They analyzed phone records, financial statements, and employment histories for all 10 victims. They investigated possible motives, business disputes, family conflicts, gambling debts, affairs. They found nothing. The Miller family lived quietly and without enemies. Robert's military service record was spotless. Janet was beloved by former students and colleagues. David's real estate business was successful and legitimate. The dinner guests were all established members of the community with stable lives and no known involvement in criminal activity. As weeks turned to months, the case began to generate national attention. The story of 10 people vanishing during Thanksgiving dinner captured the public imagination in a way that more routine disappearances did not. Reporters descended on Phoenix, psychics offered their services, amateur investigators proposed theories ranging from alien abduction to witness protection. But despite the media attention, the extensive police work, and the public's fascination with the case, no credible leads emerged. By the summer of 1984, the investigation had essentially stalled. The FBI reduced their presence, local detectives moved on to other cases, and the Miller family disappearance joined the ranks of America's most baffling unsolved mysteries. The house on Desert Rose Drive remained empty for years. Robert Miller's brother, who inherited the property, couldn't bring himself to sell it or even enter it. Local children began to whisper that it was haunted. Real estate agents stopped showing it to potential buyers after too many prospects were disturbed by the story behind its vacancy. Eventually, the house was sold to investors who renovated it and rented it to tenants who didn't know its history. But it never felt quite right to the people who lived there. Renters complained of strange sounds, unexplained cold spots, and the persistent feeling that they were being watched. Most moved out within a year. For 41 years, the Miller family case remained officially open but effectively abandoned. Occasionally, a new detective would review the files, hoping fresh eyes might spot something previous investigators had missed. But the evidence was sparse, the witnesses were gone, and the trail had gone cold decades earlier. Then, in November 2024, everything changed. Claire Rowe had been collecting vintage cameras from estate sales for 3 years. As a freelance photographer specializing in film development, she was drawn to the possibility of discovering forgotten images trapped inside old equipment. Most of the time, she found ordinary family snapshots, birthday parties, school graduations, vacation photos. But the hunt for something extraordinary kept her coming back to garage sales and estate auctions across Phoenix. The estate sale at 3247 Cactus Lane was typical of dozens she'd attended. An elderly woman had passed away, and her relatives were selling her possessions before putting the house on the market. Tables covered the front lawn, displaying a lifetime's accumulation of items that no longer had anyone to treasure them. Claire spotted the cameras immediately. A card table near the garage held a collection of vintage equipment, Polaroid instant cameras from the 1970s, a few 35mm models from the 1980s, and several older formats that hadn't been manufactured in decades. But it was the Kodak Instamatic that drew her attention. The camera was in exceptional condition, its brushed metal body showing minimal wear despite its 1983 manufacture date. When Claire opened the film compartment, she discovered something that made her pulse quicken: a cartridge of 110 film, still sealed in its protective casing. The exposure counter showed that 12 pictures had been taken. Someone had used half the roll and then put the camera away, leaving the remaining images undeveloped for over 4 decades. "That belonged to my aunt," explained the elderly man running the sale. "Found it in her closet when we were cleaning out the house. She passed last month, 93 years old." Claire paid $25 for the camera and drove directly home to her makeshift darkroom. She had learned through experience that old film was unpredictable. Sometimes it yielded perfect images despite decades of storage. Other times, chemical degradation had rendered it useless. But even damaged film could tell stories, and Claire had become expert at coaxing images from challenging negatives. The first photograph emerged slowly in the developer solution. It showed a dining room table set for a large gathering, 10 place settings with formal china, crystal glasses, and cloth napkins arranged with obvious care. The composition suggested someone had wanted to document the preparation for a special meal. The second image showed the same table, now occupied by 10 people. An older couple sat at the head of the table, with what appeared to be family members and close friends filling the remaining seats. Everyone was smiling, raising their glasses in what looked like a toast. The warm lighting and autumn decorations suggested a holiday celebration, most likely Thanksgiving. The third photograph changed everything. The scene was the same: dining room, table, 10 people, but the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Several of the dinner guests were looking toward something outside the camera's frame, their expressions showing surprise or concern. And there, barely visible through the sliding glass door that led to the backyard, was a dark silhouette. Someone was standing on the patio watching the dinner party through the glass. Claire's hands trembled as she continued developing the remaining images. Each photograph revealed another piece of a terrifying sequence of events. Photograph 4. The mysterious figure had moved closer to the glass door. Several of the men at the table had risen from their chairs. Photograph 5. The patio door was now open. The dark figure was entering the house. Photograph 6. Chaos had erupted in the dining room. Chairs were overturned, wine had spilled across the white tablecloth, and people were moving frantically toward the exits. The intruder stood in the center of the room, holding something metallic in his hands. Photographs 7 through 9 documented the systematic emptying of the dining room. In each successive image, fewer people were visible until only the mysterious figure remained, standing alone among the abandoned place settings. Photographs 10, 11, and 12 showed the aftermath. An empty dining room with overturned furniture, scattered food, and spilled beverages. The scene looked exactly like what police had found at 2847 Desert Rose Drive on November 25, 1983. Claire stared at the developed photographs spread across her kitchen table. She had stumbled onto the only visual record of the Miller family's final moments and evidence of whoever was responsible for their disappearance. She called the Phoenix Police Department's cold case unit. Detective Maria Santos, who had inherited the Miller file from her predecessor, was initially skeptical. She had fielded dozens of calls over the years from people claiming to have information about the case. Most led nowhere. But when Claire described the photographs in detail, Santos agreed to meet with her. "These are definitely from the Miller house," Santos confirmed after examining the images. The table layout, the china pattern, even the light fixture, everything matches our crime scene photos from 1983. Digital enhancement revealed shocking details that weren't visible in the original prints. The mysterious intruder was clearly a man, tall and thin, wearing dark clothing and what appeared to be latex gloves. In the clearer images, investigators could see he was holding a syringe. "This changes our entire understanding of the case," Santos said. "We're looking at evidence of a planned attack, probably involving sedatives or other drugs." DNA analysis of the photographs themselves was impossible. Too much time had passed and the developing chemicals had destroyed any traces that might have existed. But handwriting analysis of notations on the film cartridge provided a crucial lead. The film had been labeled Thanksgiving 1983 Miller House in neat cursive handwriting. When compared to known writing samples, the script matched that of Margaret Chen, Janet Miller's closest friend and one of the 10 dinner guests. Margaret had been an amateur photographer. Her family confirmed that she often brought her camera to social gatherings and documented special occasions. She must have been taking pictures throughout the evening, capturing what she thought would be pleasant memories of a holiday celebration. Instead, she had inadvertently recorded the evidence that would finally solve the case. Ground-penetrating radar revealed anomalies in the soil behind the Miller house. Excavation began in December 2024, more than 4 decades after the family's disappearance. They found the bodies buried in carefully concealed graves, scattered across the property's 3 acres. All 10 victims were identified through dental records and DNA analysis. The condition of the remains suggested they had been killed shortly after the Thanksgiving dinner, then buried within hours of their deaths. But the investigation revealed another shocking discovery. Hidden beneath the false floor of a storage shed on the property, detectives found evidence of a sophisticated drug laboratory. Beakers, tubes, chemical residue, and detailed notes about experimental pharmaceuticals. The laboratory belonged to Dr. Marcus Webb, who had lived next door to the Miller family from 1979 until his death in 2019. Webb had been a licensed psychiatrist until 1982, when the state medical board revoked his credentials for conducting unauthorized drug experiments on patients. After losing his license, Webb had continued his research in secret, using his basement laboratory to develop experimental sedatives and hallucinogens. He needed test subjects for his work, and he found them by kidnapping people from around Phoenix, transients, runaways, anyone whose disappearance wouldn't generate significant police attention. But on November 24, 1983, Webb's secret was discovered. According to documents found in his home after his death, the Miller family had become suspicious of Webb's activities. They had noticed strange smells coming from his property, unusual traffic at all hours, and the occasional sound of someone screaming from his basement. Robert Miller had decided to call the police after Thanksgiving dinner. He had discussed his concerns with the dinner guests, asking for their advice about how to handle the situation. Webb had been listening. He had installed surveillance equipment throughout the neighborhood, including microphones that allowed him to monitor conversations in nearby houses. When he learned of the Miller family's plans to expose him, he decided they all had to die. Webb broke into the Miller house during dinner, using a fast-acting sedative administered through injection. The drug rendered all 10 people unconscious within minutes. He then transported their bodies to pre-dug graves on their own property, burying them while they were still alive but unable to wake up. The photographs that Margaret Chen had taken showed the final moments before the sedative took effect, the last evidence of 10 innocent people who had simply wanted to share a holiday meal with their loved ones. Webb had continued living next door for 36 more years, monitoring the burial site and ensuring the bodies were never discovered. He died of natural causes in 2019, taking his secret to the grave. The Miller house was demolished in 2025. The property was purchased by the city of Phoenix and converted into a memorial park dedicated to the 10 victims of Dr. Marcus Webb's crimes. Claire Rowe kept the Instamatic camera that had captured those final moments. She continued developing forgotten film from estate sale cameras, always hoping to find more evidence of crimes that had gone unsolved, more families who deserved justice, more truths waiting to be brought into the light. The Miller family case proved that sometimes the most important evidence is hidden in the most unlikely places. A camera forgotten in a closet, film that waited 41 years to be developed, photographs that captured not just images, but testimony. In the end, it wasn't advanced forensics or brilliant detective work that solved one of Phoenix's most baffling mysteries. It was 12 pictures taken by someone who never imagined she was documenting the last moments of 10 people's lives. The camera sees what the eye misses, and sometimes justice is just one photograph away.